This Tuesday on CNN 10, strains, sabotage, and one small step. I'm Carl Azus, always glad to have you watching. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had been planning a trip to Moscow, Russia this week. Yesterday he canceled it and instead headed to Brussels, Belgium. That's where the leaders of the United Kingdom, Germany, and France were scheduled to discuss international tensions with Iran. And the U.S. Secretary of State decided to join them. U.S. military officials recently said they had intelligence that Iran and groups that operate beneath its military were planning to target U.S. troops in the Middle East and at sea. In response, America sent warships, bomber planes, and other military equipment to the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage of water that borders Iran. Now, U.S. intelligence indicates Iran may be putting missiles aboard small Iranian boats in the Persian Gulf. And the U.S. is moving missiles of its own to the region. An American military official says they're defensive in nature. But the U.S. says that the threat from Iran is still real and credible, and that America is taking it seriously. With tensions simmering between those two countries, an official with the British government is calling for a period of calm.
We are very worried about the risk of a conflict happening by accident, with an escalation that is unintended really on either side, but ends with some kind of conflict. And so we'll be sharing those concerns with my European counterparts, with Mike Pompeo.
As U.S. Secretary Pompeo meets with those officials in Belgium, Iran is flexing its muscles in the Middle East.
An Iranian naval show of force in the Persian Gulf, just as the U.S. deployed an aircraft carrier to the region. A senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander going on state TV saying American military assets are in their crosshairs. Imagine this is their aircraft carrier, he said. At least 40 or 50 aircraft are on board and 6,000 personnel. Right now, they're a target for us. The U.S. says it urgently deployed the USS Abraham Lincoln to the Persian Gulf and sent both B-52 bombers and additional Patriot anti-aircraft batteries to the Middle East, after the U.S. said it detected Iranian military movement that could indicate a threat to U.S. bases in the region. Before leaving for Brussels, Secretary of State Pompeo with a warning for the Iranians.
An attack on American interest from an Iranian-led force, whether it's an Iranian proper or it's an entity that is controlled by the Iranians, we will hold the responsible party accountable.
Iran accuses the Trump administration of escalating the situation. Tehran accusing Washington of trying to bring Iran to its knees through economic and psychological warfare. Iranian parliamentarians telling CNN talks with the Trump administration are out of the question for now. Americans are not worth having a dialogue with, this parliamentarian says. They can't be trusted for talks. They're not worthy of dialogue, and they lie about their intentions for meeting and talking with us. If they wanted dialogue, they wouldn't have threatened us militarily. With tough talk on both sides, many Iranians, already suffering under tough U.S. sanctions, are concerned the situation could escalate into an armed conflict with devastating consequences. Fred Pleitkin, CNN, Tehran.
Meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump is warning Iran not to take action against American interests, saying, quote, "If they do anything, it would be a very bad mistake. We'll see what happens." If there is a confrontation between Iran and the U.S., the Middle Eastern country has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. That could impact the global economy, since about 30% of the world's crude oil is shipped through the strait. There was an incident earlier this week involving 4 oil-carrying ships that were near the strait. They were apparently targeted by an act of sabotage. International officials, including U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo, are not saying Iran was behind it. And Iran's government called the incidents, quote, "alarming and regrettable." But anxiety is high in the region.
What we're learning is that these 4 vessels, these commercial vessels that were sabotaged, one of them is this one, the El Mazuka, a Saudi-registered vessel, appear to have had these sabotage incidents in the early hours of Sunday morning. We now know that there were the 4 vessels, 2 of them were registered to Saudi Arabia, 2 registered to the Emirates, and 1 registered to Norway. What appears to have happened, what we're understanding and learning, is that a call was made in the early hours of Sunday morning saying that water was perhaps getting into the engine room, that something out of the ordinary was happening. And over the space of the next couple of hours, it appeared that 4 vessels out here in the Straits of Hormuz off the port of Fujairah were experiencing some sort of irregularities. The Emirati authorities began investigating, and that's when they realized there were these incidents of sabotage. Now, it's not quite clear yet what caused this sabotage, how it was perpetrated, or even, for that matter, who perpetrated it. Emirati authorities clearly investigating, but what we know is that these 4 vessels out here, and you can see across the horizon here, there are about 100 or so vessels parked up here, that these 4 different vessels that were impacted by the sabotage were not in the same place. They were scattered throughout the area. And of course, this comes at a time when there's rising tensions between the United States and Iran. The Abraham Lincoln carrier battle group is on the way into the area. Patriot missile battery is on the way into the area as well as B-52 bombers. The coast of Iran, not far away from here. So while the Emirati authorities continue to investigate, and we're awaiting the outcome of that investigation, not quite clear yet when it will come, but while we're waiting for the outcome of that investigation, of course, these sabotage incidents risk raising tensions.
10-second trivia. What was the name of NASA's last manned mission to the moon? Luna 2, Apollo 13, Constellation, or Apollo 17? The last time a human set foot on the moon's surface was during NASA's Apollo 17 mission. The first time someone set foot on the moon occurred 50 years ago on July 16, 1969, as part of NASA's Apollo 11 mission. NASA estimates that 530 million people around the world watched on TV or listened on the radio as Commander Neil Armstrong took the first steps. He also took a little bit of heat over something he said.
The Eagle has landed.
When Neil Armstrong stepped out to become the first man on the moon, not a soul on Earth could have guessed he would land in the middle of a cosmic controversy.
That's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
The problem? The first part of his historic sentence, "That's 1 small step for man," is grammatically incorrect. It should have been 1 small step for a man. And that missing A has been setting off grammarians ever since.
Liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis.
Through all the years, NASA has insisted that he did say the A, and modern microphones would have picked it up. Instead, the word was lost on scratchy old equipment operating nearly 250,000 miles away. And Armstrong, though he rarely gave interviews, throughout his life agreed with NASA.
Thank you so much.
Many scientists have tried to analyze the recordings and break down the sound waves with inconclusive results. But now researchers from Michigan State and Ohio State believe they have evidence that Armstrong's utterance may have been shaped less by space than by something very down to earth.
The famous astronaut was an Ohio boy, and these researchers studied hundreds of recordings of natives saying the words "for" and "a," and they found almost 200 times the words were pushed together, making a sound like "fruh." So listen again.
That's 1 small step for man.
Like the moon trip itself, the theory may be a long shot, but it could also prove the final word on the words of the man on the moon.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Tom Foreman, CNN, Washington.
Maybe you've heard of gorillas in the mist. This video proves they don't like the rain. At least these gorillas don't. A zookeeper recorded this at the Riverbank Zoo in South Carolina. The animals are apparently under an awning, but where they really want to be is under their roof. After one of them makes the trip, it's not long before the others follow suit. For the primates in that climate, it's high time it got more dry. It makes them sigh if there's a giant storm so violent they revile it. Wonder why it won't be quiet. They could riot. They won't buy it. So to tie it up, just dry it up and give the ape a break. When the weather becomes wetter and you don't want helter-skelter, get a lean-to, get a tin roof, or Gorilla Glue a shelter. I'm Carl Azus, and that's CNN.